All right. So once again, hello and good evening, everyone. So as some of you might know, and maybe some of you are also just joining for the first time, my name is Deji Adebusoye, and I'm the coordinator of the Governor of the Young Men's Fellowship of the Covenant Nation. Let me say a big thanks to you for joining this session. And I'd like to say a big thanks also to our panelists who have all joined quite early. And I think it sends a strong message to everyone in the house on how important time is to these men who have joined us so early. So Mr. Wuneli, Mr. Deyinka, Mr. Wright, thank you very much for joining. I will do an introduction very shortly, but just to give a background, a very quick background. The Young Men's Fellowship actually is one of the fellowship under the Covenant Nation community groups, and we've had several semesters. It's run in semesters, and there are 2 semesters every year. And each semester takes about 8 weeks, and we welcome a new group of young men into our own group, and we run an 8 week session with them. This is probably going to be the last session for this or one of the last 2 sessions for this particular semester. So we've had 8 weeks of continuous learning, and during that 8 weeks, we've touched on different subjects. One of the subjects we talked about was developing the man, and during that session, we explored the concept of learning, networking, and mentorship. And then we also explored the topic on working the man, during which we talked about diligence, we talked about grit, we talked about hard work. And then we looked at the subject of equipping the man, which is where we explored the concept of financial management. So for all these sessions, we've always brought in people to talk, sit in panel, discuss, answer questions. But I think the highlight of all the things we've done this semester is actually this dialogue we're going to be having today, because we want to tie everything together. We want to bring everything together as we throw questions to people like all the fathers who share our faith and have made a success of their endeavors. It's not been easy, and as many of them will share as we go on, but they've been able to keep their faith in the midst of it all, and they've been able to make strong progress. And that's why I think they stand in a good place for us to throw the questions at them. I would start the introduction. I wouldn't read through all the bios, because I think we've all seen them. That's why a lot of us are joining today. So we have 3 guests with us. We have Mr. Mezo Muneli, who is the managing partner of Sayal Capital Agribusiness Managers Limited. We have Mr. Tunjade Yinka, who is the group managing director of the Republican Group. And we have Mr. Deji Wright, who is the managing director of Transport Services Limited. And they've all joined us today. They don't know, these are the bios. I'm not going to read through them, but I think we've all had time to go through the bios of the 3 of them. And I'm sure they are itching to begin to listen to the questions that we have for them. We call them the hard questions. So I consciously did not send the questions ahead of time to you, because I wanted it to be as practical as possible. And that's why we actually reached out to all the young men. They sent in questions. I pulled together some questions on my own. And I even asked my son and daughter to throw in 1 or 2 questions as well. So you'll probably hear a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old question along the line, just to see what they would want to know from older men that have way more experience than them. So we'll get started. As we go on, if you have questions, please also feel free to drop it in the group chat. We'll try to get through as many as we can. We definitely not be able to go through all the questions we have, but if you have questions, please feel free to throw them in the chat box, and we'll take them one after the other. And I'm going to be posting the questions to our panelists in no particular order. So if any other person has, wants to chip in on the question that's already been asked, please feel free to do so. All right, our very first question will go to Mr. Wuneli. And the question is, we all have an ideal about living a purposeful life. are you doing what you perceived as purpose when you were much younger? And if not, what has changed and how did you navigate it?
I was hoping you start with easy warm-up questions first before before you dived into it, but that's fine. And glad to be here, glad to have the opportunity to speak with everyone. And I do have a request first before I start speaking, is for participants to put on their cameras. So it's always good to know who I'm speaking to. So it's not just a blank screen. It makes it a bit more personal. And if I'm going to be telling you some personal stories, it'll be good to also see, the faces of the people. So I think I'll start answering the question in that if I think of myself, my faith personally, my career, I think I've evolved and over the years, and from perspective of purpose. When I was younger, I wanted, and younger is relative, so maybe instead of using younger, when I was in my 20s, I wanted to be involved in building businesses, but I wasn't really sure what that meant or in what form, but felt that I was driven to build businesses. And I had, in my 20s, even in my late teens, been involved in different startups. Many weren't successful. And then as my career developed, I think it clarified for me that it was building businesses as an investor, and in particular in a sector that could have impact in a broad range of the lives of people. And for me, agribusiness. And so it's the path wasn't necessarily clear when I was in my 20s, even though I know big picture what I wanted to do, and then clarified as I went through my career, engaging and meeting people and doors open. I'll pause there. And did I know whether I answered all aspects of your question? If I missed something out.
So yeah, so I think we're on track. So I think that question came from the place where, when we are all very young, we're all driven by, I want to live like what is my purpose? Why am I here? And we look back and we feel every year like we failed if it feels like we don't either know that purpose, or we feel like either we don't know that purpose, or we feel like what we think is the purpose, we've deviated a lot from it. So I think the question is coming more from, do you get a sense that there was kind of purpose you had when you were much younger and you deviated from it, or I've just worked my way somehow, made sense of every step of the way? I think the question was more from that direction.
Okay, understood.
Yeah.
Then the short answer is if I would say there's a difference, I think when I was younger, I thought I was more financially motivated. And then, in other words, more on how can I earn more? And then through the years, realized that that was less important for me. And if I focused on more what I enjoyed, impacting people's lives, what felt I was called to do, then financial success will come. And as the years progressed, different things tweaked. So I recall a conversation with my wife in 2009, where she asked me, for example, what sector excited me. And at that time, I'd worked in financial services, oil and gas, telecoms. And my response then, jokingly, was any sector that makes money excites me. And at the time, I was also exploring opportunities in agribusiness. And then the more I explored and the more I looked at the sector, the more I got excited, not just for the possibility to do well financially, but the ability to impact people's lives. And it's hard to do in oil and gas. At least I feel it's hard to do in oil and gas. But as an investor, building businesses that are primarily in rural areas, creating jobs for me was impactful. And I've done that the last 12 years, and it's hard to imagine doing anything else but activities in this sector. But I think it's evolved over time, and I've gotten better clarity on how to bring to reality the things I felt within me that was motivating me in my earlier years.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think that's a good segue to the next question, and I will direct that to Mr. Deyinka. So someone is asking, he says that I seem to have missed things I was supposed to have done earlier in life. How do I make up for it? So this is someone that seems to, there are certain things he feels he should have done much earlier in his life, but it seems he has missed them. How can he make up for those things?
Thank you very much, Deji. Thanks, and thanks for the opportunity to be here. Now that question takes me to, I think it was about 2 years ago. I had a young man, a lawyer, who came to see me in church, if I can remember, I think he was in his early 20s. At this point, he had finished his law degree. And you could tell he wasn't happy at all. And the question I asked him while I was counseling him was, what exactly is the problem? He felt that he hadn't done everything that he thought he would have done by 20, and at that age. So I had to remind him that first, you have a law degree at 20. Sometimes this generation tend to really be very tough and hard on itself, because we see other people who have done certain things at certain ages. My personal experience is that you appreciate life more when you begin to look back at where you're coming from. There's certain things that you don't quite see clearly until you see them in hindsight. Again, as believers, what has happened and what I've seen over time is that in every situation where God has taken me to, even when I was restless and I thought that was a waste of my time, later on in life, I've come to understand why He took me through that route, why He took me through the different areas where He has taken me to. There's certain clients that I work for today, whom I help in terms of shaping their marketing strategy, that they're in sectors that I never would have known if I hadn't, at one time or the other, just passed through those sectors, either as an observer or I've been in a very funny meeting where I was very impatient and I thought, these guys are just wasting my time. So to speak specifically to the person who has that question, is that if we trust that God is taking us somewhere, then we must understand that He doesn't want us to see the full journey from the beginning. And sometimes as we progress in life, we begin to see really why it took us through the places where we went to at certain times of our lives. So I hope that that answers the question succinctly.
Yes, that was very, very helpful, very, very clear. Thank you very much, Mr. Deyinka. Mr. Wright, we'll move a bit into the subject on family, and the question is, it seems many want to get married until they eventually get married. And so what are some of the most challenging realities of marriage for you? How have you navigated them? What advice should young men pay attention to early in their marriages? I think that's a lot of questions packed together. And I think I would want Mr. Wundele and Mr. Deyinka to also weigh in on this after you talk about this.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Good evening, Mezo and Mr. Deyinka. Deji, thank you for inviting me. Sorry, I had a technology problem for some few minutes, so I've not been part of the program for the last 4 or 5 minutes. In terms, to be honest, you always hear the saying that there's no perfect marriage. That is very true. But the fact is, you, like every other thing in life, you have to work your marriage. You have to work it. It's not something that to just think that, okay, because we fell in love, we liked each other, we liked each other, we got married, that is going to carry us through. It's not. It would, for me, that's not been my experience, and for many people that I know. So it means that for you to, particularly for us men, because I believe one of the very beginning of the success of marriage is fidelity, and I share it a lot with my colleagues at work, because if you have the basis to compare, then you are in a mess. And you know, as human beings, the tendency to want to compare is very, very high. Whether we all know it's a silly thing to say, to do. The scripture says we shouldn't do it, but the flesh would always want to take you there. And these are where for me, the discipline of the faith will come. So for me, our experience has been trying and working hard to make it work. But the basis of it is fidelity, because then you give yourself a very good chance of survival. And I believe that our work, this work of faith, it's not a walk in the park, no doubt about that. But it's a work that the work of grace enables you to. For me, one of my biggest challenges in my marriage, I would say personally, it's been impatient. So sometimes I'm just impatient, but as you walk through it, as you get older, you know in your heart of heart that, look, your wife is your spouse, is your best friend, because that's why I believe that the very, very platform is, people will tell you fear of God and everything, no doubt about that. Because if you try to be a godly family and you pray together, that is super important, but fidelity makes it stronger. And that's why the fear of God is the basis. But let me be honest, you've got to work at your marriage, because you are two different people with two different mindsets. You are similar in a lot of ways, but certainly not identical. So which means that, in fact, if you're not even careful, I've seen a perfect example. One of my best friends married to an English lady, and they have a very good marriage. They've been married for almost over 20 years. And when it was time to vote Brexit, he voted to stay. And one day, just discussing with my wife and I, that was when he found out that his own wife voted to exit Europe. And he was very shocked. So, but yes, these are two different people that love each other very much, two children in between them. And look at that, their political ideology, look at how different. So for me, I've been with my wife, I think some 27 years. We dated 7 years, we married for 20. So I believe that patience as men, especially when you're a man of faith, a man who is leading a business, you're dealing with a lot of issues. Sometimes, the truth, I'll come home, I'll snap on issues that had nothing to do with that. But it's just the type of day I've had. And the older I got, I was able to deal with that and knowing fully well that, look, this is transferred aggression. This woman has not done anything, So those are like the examples. But I believe that God, very early on in your marriage, just hand it over to God and be vulnerable about that. And if you can be vulnerable with each other, let each other look, God is ourselves. When we err, we ask for forgiveness, and fidelity would help a long way. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Dinka, do you want to chip in? And I think that particular response on, as a young man, what should you also, I think that you talked on it, what should you know much earlier? What would you advise that young men know early in their marriages that will save them, a lifetime of worries and troubles as they go on?
Meso, do you want to go for it?
I'm happy to go after you.
Okay, all right, thanks. So the reason this is very important is that as a young man, actually you see this is perhaps one of the most important decisions that you would ever make. Several lives have either been detoured or have gone the right way because they made the right decision or the wrong decision at this point. So marriage is not something that you joke with. But I say then that, so how do you prepare for marriage? You don't prepare for marriage when it is time to marry. You prepare for marriage long before it is time to marry. So the first thing is to know Christ and to know him intimately, to be close to him before marriage comes up. And so for some of us, and not everybody has the story of having been born again from school, from the university, and therefore finding it easy in terms of knowing God and then knowing which choice they had to make early in the day. If you know Christ early enough, I think it helps you in one way. Because when the Bible says that two will become one, it doesn't mean that it is automatic. It doesn't mean that everything just works like that, just at the press of a button. I like the way Deji has also, that our speaker has taken it to talk about fidelity. Trust is very critical. But first is trust in God. Because when you make that choice because of your intimacy and your relationship with God, then you trust that whatever challenges you have along the way, God is in it with you. If you don't have that assurance and that trust, then things become very shaky. So the first thing is just that trust, that relationship with God as a foundation, and then to then trust God. When you make that decision, God is with you. Now you then have to do a lot of work, because as again was said, you're coming from two different backgrounds, two different families. So there's certain things that would not gel the way you want it to gel early, but as you grow older and as you become more mature, you begin to see that there's certain things that are really not worth fighting on, because that is the way that God has built them. So critical to know yourself before you get married, and two, to know God before you get married, long before you get married. Those two things are going to help you in terms of getting the right partner and then starting the journey with that partner, the journey of life. Yeah.
Thanks. I think to build on comments by Tunji and Deji, I 100% agree that the most important decision you make in your life is choosing your life partner. And it's not something that should be taken lightly. And because this decision would have huge ramifications on your life and those of your children for years afterwards. So it's a very key decision. And if I think about my earlier years before I got married, I've been married 21 years. I've known my wife 29. We met in university. And, when I was in university, I was actually worried that I would be distracted by the different women I was meeting. And how will I know when I've met the right person, and could I've would I lose my way? So this was me in university. And so I actually wrote down the things that were very important to me and what I wanted to find in a wife. And I don't know what prompted it to me. I think it was probably one evening of prayer and concern, and then wrote this down. And what was interesting is that roughly 6-7 months later, I ran into my wife at an event, and things just clicked and was clear. It still took another 7 years before we got married. Because I also had to convince her that I was also, serious and grounded in my faith. So it still took quite a while. But I think it also helped me recognize what was I looking for and why was that important to me. So especially with a decision like this. And a comment Deji made about marriage is work, I think is very true. I mean, marriage is work, love is intentional. And you really need to come into a relationship from that context. And in my first few years of marriage, I remember thinking about all the different areas that my wife should change and get better at. And I think it was probably in my year 6 or 7 or 8 of marriage that I realized that, I need to focus on my own areas, my own problems, my own issues, because, people are imperfect, both people. So, just to be aware that just as your spouse or your wife potentially has her flaws, so do you. And it's probably best served for you to work on your own areas areas you need to improve on, so you can become a better spouse, better husband to your wife, and work on it. And it's easier to change yourself. I mean, change yourself is not easy, but it's easier to work on yourself versus working on the other person. But realizing as well as you go through this, that different individuals have strengths and weaknesses. And when I did my marriage counseling many years ago, the couple that did the counseling mentioned, effectively give the analogy of two hands clasping, and effectively saying that one person's strengths covers the other person's weaknesses. And you should approach marriage like that, that you have your strengths, they have their strengths, and in a partnership joined together, you can support each other and help each other become better individuals. And I agree that as well. I think Tunji made this comment that the issues we thought were big deals 20 years ago are definitely not big deals today. So also to put things in perspective as you work through relationships, that it's also just understanding what is really important and how do you work on those things that are really important, and then to overlook those things that are in the grand scheme of things not a big deal. But it's work, but it's work that is worth doing, because as your marriage grows, you definitely it's richer. It's a more fulfilled relationship. Yes, but it's definitely the most important decision you would ever make, personally, professionally. So it's definitely one that you should approach with thoughtfulness and prayer.
Thank you very much. I think the importance of marriage it cannot be disputed, and we really do have a lot of questions that are actually coming through that area, and I will just keep going at those questions. Some are a bit more specific. So someone has to say, my wife's spending pattern is different from mine. How can I address it without coming across as being stingy? So I don't know who wants to go for it.
Naked but not ashamed. If you're are you stingy? That's the first question. And so are you stingy for good? I mean, if you're stingy, certainly someone who can tell that you're stingy and you shouldn't be too ashamed to be who you are with is your wife. But if that stinginess is for the good of both of you, I find that it makes sense ultimately. So it's not about, and as we said earlier, it's like God has this way of bringing people who have two different kinds of polarity, two different modes of expression, two opposites together for his own perfect reason, which is that he wants you to complement each other. So you shouldn't be ashamed that you are the thrifty person and your partner may not be as thrifty as you when it comes to finances. There are areas where your partner is stronger than you, and he or she would not be ashamed to say that, yeah, I'm stronger. It's just about trusting each other to allow the person who has the more dominant strength in a certain area to prevail in terms of counsel. There's so many families that would have been bankrupt if they lived according to the thinking of the one who is more the easy to spend kind of person. So, but we need to agree, and again, it comes back to knowing myself and then knowing my partner and trusting that they mean well for us. Whatever it is for us. It's not just for one party, and allowing them to prevail in the area where they have the strength with God's guidance, actually.
I was going to add that, money-related matters is probably there's a short list of different issues that cause the most strain in marriage, and money-related is one of them. And so it's important to, I feel, to have a conversation around this, and it's a broad conversation. It's Are we doing joint accounts or individual accounts? Why not? How do we want to allocate budgets? Why not? And what does this mean? And just understand, and this will be an ongoing conversation, but I think it's an important one to have. And then also bearing in mind that, everybody's coming from a very different background, a very different place of what's important to them. And yes, people have their different strengths, but it's important to have these conversations. And I'll give you one personal example. Early on in my marriage, I felt, some of us have family pressures or requests to give money to extended family or family. And, and for other individuals, it may not be as big a deal. And I know early on in my marriage, giving money to family and extended family for different requests was caused issues, because the fear was, are you giving too much? If you give X amount, what does it mean for us and our own savings, our own obligations? How are you balancing? And it caused quite a bit of strain and tension, because of course I felt what I was doing was reasonable and necessary and important and not excessive. But my wife had a very different view. And one way we got around that was, one of the conversations after many arguments was, okay, what is a reasonable amount or to do that wouldn't be deemed excessive and what would give comfort? And I think in that conversation, the number, this is us personally, but what we said is, okay, if the amount is no more than 10% of income on all the various different obligations, that was acceptable. But if it's more than 10%, then it's a problem. And so for us as a couple, that's the way we discussed and got a resolution. Say, okay, it's important for me to, spend money this way, but because of the concerns, here's the framework on how we're going to do it so that it also addresses my wife's concern. And to do it in a way where, because of course, her concerns are valid. There are families that will spend everything on extended family and impact savings, and at the same time, it's important to do. So what I'll say is, for each couple individual, we need to have that conversation on what's important, how should we manage it, and why. And recognizing that everybody has each partner has a very valid context from where they're coming from that should be incorporated into the conversation.
Thank you very much. Okay, did you also want to give it a shot?
No, I think to be honest, it dealt well with the topic. And I would just start with what Tunji said, that look, you first of all have to look at your intentions. And Mezu's example is actually perfect and apt, because I've also had that's an ongoing issue, especially when you're from a big family and that's the culture, but it's something that you have to be deliberate about. The issue of marriage, you have to just be deliberate about it. As long as you are not withholding more than is normal in the marriage. And I believe that as men, it's innate in us, though people want to be, people want to be politically correct. It's innate in us to want to provide. Especially, let me qualify it as a Christian man. It's even a commandment for us to want to provide for our family. So the tendency for you to want to make sure that you are not in any mess and you are being extremely careful is there. So it's about talking about it, because if I look back and I realize that when we had this kind of challenges was because I wasn't really talking about it deliberately. Both parties had good intentions, but it's about talking about it and knowing fully well, because someone like me, I'm a long range thinker. I'm thinking about school fees, I'm thinking about this, and, so you planning, and then you have someone who just believes that, okay, we'll be fine. So the tendency to think, oh, it doesn't work that way. You have to plan your way to being fine, and so it's about really talking about it very early. And that's why I love the example Mezu gave, and the definition of a resolution. Because if you talk about these things, then because money is a big issue in marriage, let's be honest. So it's a big, 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 big issue. And I believe also as men, if we know that God expects us to be the priest of our home, contentment would also help us a lot. Because you can't say, oh, we are not spending on this, then you are buying some very expensive Gucci shoes, and So contentment, is because once you are content and it sees that okay, you are living within your means, then you have the strong basis to be able to say, let's talk about our finances, let's plan this way. And the truth is that more often than not, but thank God, a good godly wife would often follow the man once you've shown example. I believe for the person and for the people listening, you must live by example in this area. You must live by example in this area. That's what I would want to add. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's a very, 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 very complete response. But I'll follow up with it with another still towing that line, because you've all touched on a very important point. Money is really, really a major concern, and a lot of young people today, unfortunately or fortunately, things are very different from many years ago, where there are traditional roles in homes where the man is the one providing and the wife is just a carer of homes. Today we have situations where both are providing for the needs of the family, but a lot of men are still struggling with that concept of being able to pitch in terms of taking care of the home, and a lot of people still feel very strongly against it. How would you advise people going into marriage to think about the management of the home on a very general and maybe specific level as well, to make sure that nobody feels resentful with respect to the work that is being done and activities that are ongoing at home? Studying, maybe you might want to, since you're already unmuted.
These issues are really very, very touchy these days, especially because traditionally we used to have the man as a traditional person who is the breadwinner. But you're finding increasingly that you're having cases where the woman earns more than the man, or where the man is even not earning much for a very long time. So it's really it's a very tough issue that you find from time to time. In my 25 years of marriage, I've always been the one who earns more. And at several times when my wife stopped working for a very long time before she started doing some little business here and there, I was a single kind of person that was earning. But I also find that it's just as sensitive to say that the fact that you're the one that is bringing the money in does not mean that you should be the one that decides 100% how that money is spent. So it is a very, this generation finds itself in a very, very dicey situation where you find a man who is hardworking, but just not bringing in anything at a certain point in time. So I think first it's important to be selfless when we're speaking about a home, when we're talking about a home, when we're planning the home. And it's also important to be very, very conscious of financial planning, because it's not just going to, it won't be the two of us forever. Children are going to come in at a certain point in time. And we need to have very tough discussions with each other at certain times. The job that you are currently on now, are you sure this job is going to really help us to further the kind of objectives that we're looking to achieve for the family at a certain point in time? And while we're not being discontented necessarily, we're just trying to say maybe in the next 2-3 years, we need to begin to look at ways to shape our finances in a way that is going to support our objectives for the future. It's a very, very tough time. And I find that women are on the receiving end a lot more because men are not used to not being the breadwinner. And in cases where the man is not the breadwinner, it's usually very tough for them to adapt to that situation, and you find that it affects marriages adversely. So again, we need to look at this from a marathon point of view, that we're in this for the long run. This is not always going to be the way it is, and we need to plan and work cooperatively to get to the point where this changes. If it changes, because there are homes where the woman will continue to be the one that earns more than the man, that is the reality. But maybe that's the dynamics of that home. We need to understand the dynamics. Not everything fits the rule as we've always been, that's defined in the olden generation of the man being the breadwinner.
Thank you very much. Mezo, do you also want to pitch in on that?
Sure. As soon as you were speaking, I what was going through my mind is that this is probably one area that men need to work on more in terms of self-development, more than anything else in the relationship. Now I'll give personal views now, and every marriage is different, and different people have areas they want to focus on, whether it's career or family. But I think, I'll start from the perspective that it is helpful if your spouse is also working, because it also reduces pressure on you as the man to generate income for the family. So it's helpful. And also at the same time, we always expect that we'll be healthy and able to work for the rest of our life, but life throws curveballs. And there could be times when, you're sick, something happens, you lose your job, you can't work for a period of time, and having another income in the family is helpful to, work through those times in life. Now, at the same time, when you then say that it is fine for, your wife to have her own career, then that in itself also raises tensions, just as Tunji mentioned earlier. Should your wife now make more than you, then that's how do you handle that? How do you deal with that? What does that mean? Especially if you have a certain view of what your role should be. And I think then that's where I go. It means that you really need to work on yourself in terms of understanding yourself better. And, if you feel concerns, I think it's really thinking through you as an individual. How do you manage through that context? What does it mean for you? Does it define who you are as a person? Are there other ways you can impact your family positively? And these are not easy questions or were they easy answers, but it's something that I think we need to be aware of, that we need to think through and be prepared to manage in that context. Because they're real issues, and then different couples define it in different ways. But we're in a world where there are dual career homes, and we need to be prepared for different people, whether it's the man or the wife, potentially having a faster pace in their career than others at different points in time. But that in itself shouldn't define who you are. But this is, and I'll admit that there are many questions where there are no easy answers. So it's really thinking through what does that mean, and I think what I would encourage is that when whichever the topic is, when there are difficult questions or situations, to then reach out and have conversations with somebody. And I think men tend to do that less. But I think by the time you have conversations with people who are ahead in the journey, like what is happening now, I think it will give good perspective for that particular situation to help you navigate it, yourself. Because and it is important to be able to have people you can call for those situations to talk through, to resolve those issues when they do come up.
Thank you very much. So that's still on the subject of marriage, and Deji, you'll probably be starting off on this, and this is a very tricky one. The question says, how does one deal with unintended attractions to and from ladies as a Christian man? And when there is an ongoing affair, how is it to be managed to restore the marriage?
Can you read the second part? An ongoing affair.
Yeah, so I think the first question has to do with in the attractions, but the second one is, so let's assume there's even an ongoing affair, and probably the person is trying to, maybe the marriage is already in jeopardy as a result of that affair, and the person is trying to restore his home as a result of that affair. What should he do about it? How can he go about it?
Okay. The attraction, I don't understand. Who is attracted? Is he on? Oh, you said unintended attraction. The truth about it.
To or from ladies. So whether he is attracted to, or there's attraction coming from the ladies.
I think that I like what I like about this session so far is that they're asking very practical, real life questions, and I'm happy about that, because until we as Christian men are dealing with these things and having accountability groups like this, we would always feel that you're abnormal as a Christian. But as long as we're in this toga of flesh, and the Bible says it, there would always be contention, but the Spirit will always win if we yield to it. The way I deal with it, I'll be honest and practical, is, as a young Christian, I found out the word flee. That's, flee. You see, that thing, Joseph fled. You see, there are some things that I've found in my work with God that, look, there's no need to want to be manly or be amongst boys and be talking, no, those things will even get you into trouble. And the truth is that you cannot want to be committed to God and have a lot of friends. Because I'm trying to deal with a source, that's the reality. By the time you get to a certain age, ask anybody, all three of us talking, all four of us, including you that I can see, you see that the older we get, we can count all our good, very, very good friends that impact our lives on a daily basis with one hand. You really can, because if you want to do the boys' night out every other weekend or every time, then the tendency to want to shape your thoughts and your behavior along those lines are very high. So, the Bible says, he who walks with the wise becomes wise. So that is very critical. So what I used to do in those early days, and to be honest, the older you get and you walk with God and you're married, it helps you. And that's why I said the basis is fidelity, is that trust, is staying on that lane. Because if you don't have anything to compare with, and after a while, you just see that your marriage keeps getting better. That's just it. And you keep enjoying your intimate time with your wife, because that's the only thing you have, and you've settled it with yourself. It's not because the flesh, you don't have the urges, and especially for men, let's be honest, as the more blessed you are, or the more God promotes you, women, like that attraction will come. But it's, for me, is once that because you're not being vain or being silly and just thinking, oh, every woman that is talking to you is attracted to you, and you see that this is heavy, you flee that setup. You flee that. It's like we need assistants to work with us, executive assistant and all that. And then you work late. Most of the time you're in the office from 7 till 10, and you have a female, attractive, young executive assistant that is working with you from 7 to 10. It becomes very dangerous. It becomes very dangerous. So for me, the word is flee. I was sharing with a group of friends. I said, how do you do it? You look at a woman once, and the second one, you see that you move. So you don't even give yourself time enough to process the thoughts. And for me, to be honest, it has worked. Because I know that if I stayed there, I will process the thoughts. But I cut the production line early and I just move. Regards the second one, the truth is, Damage has been done. And that's why we all said, look, marriage, you work at it. You need to be repentant, really, really repentant. Because you see, Trinity said something very early on. Your choice in life about marriage would decide a lot of things, even for third parties. Even, I was reading Papa Debo's devotional this morning, and he said, there are some things that you do that would even affect your family. And he used an example of Daniel, that the people that threw him in the fire, when he came out safe and sound, the king ordered that they brought the parents and the children that knew nothing about the decision. They were burnt along. So there are some things that, and marriage is a covenant, especially when we're in faith. My partner and I, when we talk, he said, let's call it what it is. Sex outside of marriage is so intimate that it becomes a covenant as well. And that is why you will hear things that, oh, they're using juju for that man. But because you've gone into a depth of covenant that you must not and should not go into. So you've got to be extremely repentant, go back and restore your home. Because when everything, else fails, your spouse is who you are going to see there. And life will throw you challenges. Oh, no, it would. And it's your spouse at the end of the day is who you will find in that situation that will be rock solid support for you. Nobody else. So please go and restore. And restoration comes with repentance. And when you're repentant, honesty, there's vulnerability. That's why we said the choice of who you marry is critical to life. It's not somebody, and that's why for me, I found out early, those boys' night out and everything, the braggadocio side of men, they'll bring it out. But they will, it may stop you from being intimate and super vulnerable with your wife. Even because it also answers the money issue. If your wife knows that you are honest, you are earning less, but you are pulling your weight with what you're doing, I'm assuming that your choice, you've made it in God, and even that woman will never want to expose you, and it will respect you as the husband. And I believe that's why I said that the basis of this thing is fidelity. And it's also part of it, that contentment, knowing that this is what I have. I remember that as a young man, he's still in the world, you hear, oh, variety is the spice of life. Variety is the spice of life. But it's a big lie of the devil. Because you will keep looking for that spice. You will keep looking for that spice of life. And God has already put the spice in your home, in your life. I'm using what Mezo said. It's already there to clasp your hand together to strengthen you in your area of weakness. But, and don't forget, at the end of the day, all said and done, it's all just 5 minutes, 10 minutes max of passion. And after that, that spice becomes old. You are looking for a new spice. Then it will affect your finances. It will affect your judgment. It will affect your discretion. It will affect your relationship with your children. So imagine what you destroy along the way, just too many things that when we look at it in that context, it will affect, most importantly, your relationship with God. When you look at what that destructive path, it then becomes a prayer point almost every day. And that's why, for me, the answer is flee, be vulnerable with God, and ask for strength every day. And the truth is that you do that with him every day. You ask God for strength, you get better and stronger. And you are never going to get strong to the point that you feel you put yourself in a compromising position. You will never get, so if you're humble enough that, look, I will never, and you feel I'm getting there and you're running away, that's for me how you deal with it. But restoration comes with repentance. It comes with honesty. It comes with repentance, means I'm never going back to that. And the truth is that when one is fully honest and determined to make it work, the marriage even gets better, because you have seen that this is what I could have destroyed. And we have a God. Our God is a God of restoration. And once you go back, you'll find out that it would even get better. That's it. I have not been there, but I know that in other areas that we also have heard, and we go back and say, God help us. God help us. And it will truly come to your aid, but you need to be honest with yourself. That spice, you've already made your choice. You've already taken that spice, make it work, use it to cook your own stew. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, DG. Very, very holistic response. And I think that helps to address probably a lot of other questions that are probably in that line. I think you've touched on several along that line. So on the case of marriage, I will ask for more questions so that we can then go and still address some questions on career and work. And I think Mezo, you probably be in the best position to answer this. This is a question that was raised in the group. Somebody asked about working or starting a business with a spouse. Let me see that question. It said, what would you advise a young man in his late 20s to focus on building a career relationship with a spouse? Yeah, and I think that's the question.
And just to understand it, the question is whether they should or shouldn't, or how to go about doing it.
Yeah, I think it's more around how they should go about doing it.
Sure.
Let me just look at that question again, just to be sure. So he said, what will you advise a young man in his late 20s to focus on building a career or a relationship with a spouse, or is both good at that age?
Sure. So what's I'll give my personal experiences. And so for many years, always thought it would be interesting and good to work with my wife in some entrepreneurial venture. And I'm certain different people have had thoughts around it for different points in time. And we started Ace Foods together in 2010 and quickly went into a marital crisis within the first year of working together. And because it's not easy. And I think we go into the factory, we have very different styles of working. And go into the factory and you would have two CEOs with different styles giving conflicting instructions. And it was very problematic. And I think within the first year, we were fortunate to go get counseling, prompted by the wisdom of my wife. And we met with the Yenis, who are the founders of Tantalizers and have been married for many years, worked together. And effectively said, how have you been able to work together for so many years and make it work? And they were very kind enough to spend quite a bit of time with us and give us very practical advice. And some of the takeaways from that were that we had to separate roles very clearly and then stay in our lane. And given that we trusted each other, rely on the other person to do what's best for that role and not try and interfere. So for Ace Foods, we split the roles such that we play to our strengths. So she's more outgoing, personable than me. So she handles sales and marketing, external partnerships, HR. I focus on finance, operations, supply chain. And even with Sahel that we developed, we've also split such that she handles the consulting side, I handle the private equity side. And we're cross shareholders, but we literally work independently, for lack of a better word. And so I'm giving that context for just to say that it is not easy to work with your spouse. But when you have the framework right, I think can be very powerful to have a partner who you trust engage in a particular area of the business. But it's very important to be very clear on that role split. Who is responsible exactly for what, and then leave that person to handle that the way they want to handle it, and only give feedback when asked for. So it's a separate from that. We already did this from day one, but I think it's also we've been engaged from a Sahel side with other entrepreneurial families who have not necessarily done this, which is that the work role is different from the home role. So which means you need to document compensation, you need to document, so you need to have your own separate employment contracts and comp agreed. So it's not arbitrary, is not based on individual decisions, but is very clear upfront. So it needs to be codified from day one, how you engage, versus leaving it to the husband to, for example, to decide this is what it's going to be. So I'm giving that context just to say and then again, not every couple should work together. To also mention that not every couple should work together. So it's also important just to say very upfront, okay, if you're considering this, what does it mean? What are the clear roles that each individual would have? And are both of you comfortable with those clear roles? And and how that would work. And then once you've agreed and decided that, you can then decide, yes, it makes sense to go work together. No, it doesn't make sense. And how do you handle that? So it's so I hope I've answered that.
Thank you, Mezo. Those are very practical ways I think we can address it. And you're right. I don't think every couple should work together. And I think there's wisdom in identifying if you're one of those couples that you should work together or not. So very, very, very candid response. Thank you very much. So we'll have a segue to talking about career and work now. And I will direct the first question to Mr. Dinka on that. Well, this is about career work, but it's also still overlaps other areas of life. And the question is, what kept you going in tough times? The person says sometimes there's a tendency to get tired. You just want to take a break from everything. You feel overwhelmed. How do you push through, these times, and how do you navigate them with your spouse and family?
Yeah, I think what has helped me over the years is to look for personal retreats. When I say personal retreats, I mean those retreats are in the midst of everything. When you have the challenges, and as we said, and I'm very glad that the discussions we've had today have been as pragmatic and practical as possible. The times that you do have issues that you have to contend with, either marital issues or business issues, and the way that I have dealt with those issues over time is that I always dial back to where everything started from, and without any form of grandstanding. I hide myself sometimes. I don't think of myself as a CEO. I think of myself as that boy who either who needs help and goes back to God from time to time to request for that help. When I'm pushing myself too hard at a certain issue or a certain problem and things are not yielding, I recognize very quickly that I'm missing a perspective. And I try to dial back and then just bring everything down, tone it down, outside the workspace, outside the business space, and just give a day, give a week, give a month, pray about the situation, and you find that pretty
Seems you're losing Mr. Dinka, the network. Hello, Mr. Dinka, can you hear me? Can any other person hear me? Just to be sure it's not from my hand.
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay, all right. So he's dropped out. I guess Deji, do you want to take up on that question as well while we wait for
Can you run the question by me again?
So what has kept you going in tough times? So there's always a tendency sometimes to just want to give up, you're tired, you're feeling overwhelmed, and yet you still have to push through. How do you navigate those times with spouses and family and just get through those difficult times?
Okay. How do you navigate this time? The first thing is you have to start with yourself. And you see, with spouses, we've said something. If you're vulnerable and you're able to trust your wife or your husband to tell the person what you're really going through. And I would always say that one of the things I've found is leading a business, particularly in Nigeria or Korea, the reality is that it's a tough environment. And one must learn very early, if you're going to stay in Nigeria, you live in Nigeria, that, mental toughness is one of those attributes you must develop. And again, the advantage we have is our faith. You cannot do it in your strength. I find during difficult times, and I've been quite a few very, very difficult business and all that. To build a business is not easy in Nigeria. To build a home is not easy. And one of the things I found is at around 15 years ago, I was reading a book, and it was I think a first Black American billionaire. It was a Christian book. And these things have really helped me. Mentorship is very, very critical in the life of a Christian. Mentorship is important. And I remember I was reading that book. I was in the passport office waiting on the queue. And he said, if you're reading this book and you don't have a mentor, I must have been in my mid-30s, there's a problem. The guy, very successful Sunday school teacher and he was still a Sunday school teacher. You need a mentor. And I looked at my life, I don't have any mentor. And I remember discussing with my wife one particular guy, and my wife said, but Deji, successful in business, he just married the second wife, and I said, okay. So I got myself 3 Christian mentors, and she quickly protected her interest. And so I got myself 3 Christian mentors. They're still my mentors till today. They are still my mentors till today. I still talk to them. There was one particular one that I would see once a month for almost 8-9 years. And it helped shape my thinking in business and in marriage a lot. And the truth is about mentorship is that you have an imperfect person giving you a perfect message. Your mentor, if you're also vulnerable with your mentor, that look, my mentor told me then that his own mentor told him, look, if you cannot show him your checkbook, how you spend money, then you are lying to yourself. Because the truth is that it can give you even better advice than he's given himself. And the benefit of what you're going to enjoy from the mentorship, please make sure the person shares your faith very, very strongly. And he has lived what he's saying to be his faith, and prayerfully do so as well. And I did. And I remember, I love this scripture, Jeremiah 3:15, that says, I will give you a man after my heart. I'll give you a shepherd after my heart who will teach you, give you in wisdom and knowledge. So it's something you pray for, because that will help a great deal in hard times. And another mistake I see in Nigeria is that people believe that to learn, you have to go to a class. Everybody's building a CV. But reading books I have found to be one of the best form of mentorship for me. In those days, there's this, Latana Onokwa. I will go in there. I'll buy a Christian book downstairs. I'll go upstairs. I'll buy a business book. And that has helped me more than anything ever. So, and because you would have, in building that meant in a toughness, it's a spiritual thing. And it comes through prayer. Because as Christian men, we must, because that's the most vulnerable place you can be, going to God. There are times that Tunji was saying something before it dropped off. Now look, he will have a personal retreat. You're lying down, you're telling God, God, I don't know how I'm going to fix this problem. I just need your strength. I just need your strength. I just need your direction. I just need your wisdom. And because God is always there, there are times I just pick up a book in my bookshelf. I've read, I may not have read. I'm just praying, and then just to pick up that book, and I'll pick it up. You just read maybe 2 or 3 pages, and it will solve your immediate problem. God works in mysterious ways, but you see, these things, we can't have this work and be successful at it without work. And that is what unbelievers do very well. They do, all these principles are biblical, but they've taken out the biblical side of it and made it very plain, and they use it a lot. So for me, the hard times, another scripture that I liked I didn't understand it for a long time. It says, if you fail in the day of adversity, then your strength is little. And that scripture used to condemn me. I said, God, how am I going to do it? So I'm a man of little strength. I don't have faith. You know the way the devil will want to condemn you. Then one day, Holy Spirit gave me interpretation. He said, no, you build your strength daily. You don't wait for adversity to come before you build your strength. And that is how you deal with difficult times. As you grow in your career, the challenges will come, but will come in different way, shapes, or sizes. It could be a very nasty boss that is just determined to ruin you. How do you meander that situation? And it won't stop for 1 year, for 2 years. It could be financial challenges. It could be anything. So it's just being able to develop that strength on a daily basis to say, okay, I've got 30 minutes every morning. I've got to read my devotional. I've got to do this. And I've got to read a book a month. What I usually tell people is that try and read one secular book, try and read one Christian book a month if you can. But if you cannot, even if it's just 12 books a year, and you talk to people around, Mezo is given a perfect example of going to that tantalizer couple. You cannot live your life without making such moves. I'm being honest, because you'll just be fighting. And one of the things that I found in working with my mentors, and that's the thing, I never, ever, ever asked him for a favor. So there was mutual respect. Now we are friends. I didn't go to him cap in hand, and people say, oh, come and mentor us. After second session, they're asking for a favor. You're killing that relationship. You want the person to freely give you what God has blessed him, and you're learning more from the person's failure than the person's success, which is what some things we don't like to talk about in the church. And that is even stronger. Where they've stumbled, once you know, then you know you can avoid it. So that is the way that I see that mentorship, educating yourself, daily building of your strength in God, your work with God, that is what will sustain you. Because when challenges come, I can tell you, people will run. Yeah. People will run. And that's why you see some people, they felt they just never could come back because they placed their trust in people. And when they needed it the most, the people they trusted, they loved, they invested in just failed them. But if you and I have built that relationship on our relationship with God, and we know he never fails. He may not answer you in that particular position. He may not, but you know God is sovereign because you would have experienced him in your work. Even if you failed in that particular thing, you will see God will bring you out to a glorious place. And so that's all I have on that point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. One of the things we touched on very early during the semester, we looked at the subject of mentorship. And I think most of the young men in the group, we agreed that we actually stressed how important it is for us to have mentors that we can talk to. And like you said, even books, sometimes you could get some mentoring from reading books, and it could be very helpful. I have a lot of questions. Unfortunately, time is running out. I really, really wish we could get through all the questions, but I will cycle through a few more. But these ones, I'll appreciate very short responses so that we can get through them. Some of them are hilarious. I will start with one of the questions, with a 10-year-old question. And the 10-year-old question is, what did you consciously decide not to do? I don't know if you understand that question. Is there something you consciously decided that you will not do? Okay, I like that it's a 10-year-old question that is causing the longest. Yeah.
Well, early and very, very quick answer again. While I was in the university for my first degree, I'd never really. I wasn't born again then, but again, I had never taken alcohol. I didn't grow up in a home where alcohol was really that. But there was a time that I was led by a friend to try a bottle, and it was based on the fact that when you're drinking something and they're telling you that you're drunk and you're trying to pretend and act like you're not drunk, but as you're doing that, you're actually showing that you're drunk. And I took a cup, and they asked me to slap someone who was bigger than me, 2 times my size. I wouldn't do that if I wasn't drunk. I slapped him, and immediately from that day, I told myself I will never touch alcohol again, because I just belong to the group of people who I can't mix with alcohol. And then when I became a Christian, and on and on and on and on, so there's certain things that I know I'm not strong on, so I will not even tempt God to go close to those things. That is a very simple answer for an 8-year-old. The areas where I know I'm not strong, I will not go there. I will not trust my flesh to be in the same room with a woman for 24 hours who is not my wife, and believe that my flesh is strong enough to battle, because it's my spirit that is born again, not my flesh. So that's my own simple answer.
Thank you very much. Meso.
Honestly, I'm stumped. but I like Tuji's responses on the trusting. I mean, you can't trust your flesh, so you have to. And to, I think it was Deji's comment earlier about fleeing, and I actually wrote that down and circled. I think are very important. So, honestly, I'm stumped. So let me leave this one to Deji or others too.
All right, thanks, Deji. You want to go ahead?
Yes, to be honest, I belong to those group of people that would always not want to brag. And I like what Tuji said, look, my flesh is the one that is born again. And my spirit is the one that is born again. And I just believe that there's some things I've taken a decision I will never do, I remember when I was younger, I said, look, it was the fad to smoke Igbo. I don't know what there are all sorts of names they call it. And I said, look, I will never touch that thing. I drank, I smoked. And I remember the day I stopped smoking. And you see, our God is humorous, I was in uni, and I was so sick that night. And I just bought a packet of Benson. And I felt I would die. I've never felt that. And I told God, I said, if I survive tonight and you let me wake up and go to the clinic, I would never, by that time I stopped drinking. I would never smoke again. And God, I survived till about 7 a.m. I ran to the clinic, and apparently there was this chronic flu going around then. I was in Scotland then. And I they gave me the jab, and I went back home. By 6 p.m., I can never forget, it was a Friday night stroke Saturday morning. And by 6 p.m., I was okay. I took the Benson and Edges packet, and I took it to the bathroom and I turned water on it. And from that day, never again. And I think that just being honest with oneself, know that this is what I can handle, this is not what I can handle, And that's why I use the example that you must have, you must check your friends. From Tuji's example, say a friend said, try and drink this. You must, you see, until you get to that particular age that your friends and you are all settled, know each other and respect your boundaries. You must be very careful, because attempt to want to please tend to get us into challenges. So that's how I would answer that.
Thank you very much. And the last round of questions, because we really need to stop now. What is one thing you know now that you wish you knew when you were in your early 20s? I think we can start from DJ and work that back. What is one thing you know now that you wish you knew in your early 20s?
Handling money better, certainly. It's handling money better, because the kind of money you had as a student and everything, and you wasted, But really, to be honest, the only thing I would always say that, is God, knowing God. Knowing God, it's the most important. And you see, the way the world presents, the market the world to us, it makes it looks fascinating, interesting, but really it's not. It's not. And they make us Christians look like losers. They make us, but I'm happy that look at the session we're having now, because, and I keep saying it, that look, when we talk about Christianity in Nigeria, people say it's not working. I tell them, take the Christians, take the churches, take our prayers out of this country. You will know that there will be no Nigeria. I'm one of those confident Christians that I don't let people rubbish. Like, you put 100 people in a room with 2 ACs. They will tell you the place is badly ventilated, but there's still some sort of ventilation. Take those 2 ACs, you will see what will happen. People will start dying. So for me, that one thing is just God, and we should serve him unashamedly. We're not going to be perfect. We are going to move from faith to faith, from glory to glory, because there's so much to know about him and there's so much to do. There's so much impact to make. And look at this session we're having. The churches were not having it 20, 30 years ago. Now, in those days, I remember you build churches, they don't build car parks because Christians don't own cars. And you go, they'll be giving you envelope in your parents' churches for years for building a committee for 20, 30 years. The generation built it, as they did the decking, we will celebrate it. But now, because of the knowledge God is giving us, the church is doing wonders. Nigerian churches are owning universities. We're building medical schools. We're not there yet, but we've made significant progress. So for me, that one thing I would have loved to know earlier and start navigating through, start to use as a tool to navigate life would certainly have been God. Thank you.
Thank God. Thank you very much, Deji. Mezo, you want to go next?
Yes. So when I was younger, I tried to solve everything myself. I was very reluctant to go to others for feedback, advice. And I learned very painfully through the years that, it just caused more tension, pressure for me. And I learned the hard way that going through different challenge situations, I definitely need to engage more, speak to others, go to God in prayer, and not wait until the pain is so much that I can't bear it anymore, that I then go to prayer. So I've learned that before the pain gets too much, let me go to prayer earlier so that it's not as painful. So I think if I look at my 20-year-old self or in my 20s and now, I think it's just being more aware that I can't do it myself. I can't solve those issues myself, and I definitely need guidance from God. And in many cases, that guidance could even be an indication of my spirit to go speak to this person or that person, or to get this feedback that will then be useful to solve the issue, versus thinking I could do it all myself. And so I think, at least for me personally, it's I'll point to that.
Thank you very much, Mezo. Yeah. Yeah, Mr. Baker. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Deji. And I think Mezo and Deji have actually painted the picture very, very well. The earlier you find the wisdom of God and you cultivate the Holy Spirit in a life, the better. So I find myself wishing that I had all of that so early from the beginning, because it is so rich. If you look at the book of Job 5, I think it's 27, it says, "Lo, we have searched it, we have investigated it." Right? You don't need to go and search for it anymore. We have searched it, we have investigated it, we checked it. just follow the word of God. There are no two ways. There's nothing in this world. Those principles are not going to change ever, right? There's some things, there's a shortcut that looks very easy to man. There's a way that seemeth good to man, but the ends are ways of destruction. So I wish that I knew those things very early, because if you know those things early, and I'm glad that men who are on this call are knowing that early. If you know that early, you will find that you will travel fast. You will not swim against the tide. You will not go into paths and businesses and decisions that you come back 3 years later and God says, I told you not to do it. So I think that wisdom is a very great thing. I would say to Tunji 20 to say, I wish I knew this earlier. But thank God, and it's not too late. So that and the way you cast it, you say, it seems like speaking to old men, that you are speaking to some 70s or 80s people, but at the end of the day, we're still learning every day. As you've seen very clearly, we struggle with things that normal human beings struggle with, but the grace of God just helps to put us in proper perspective. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very, very much. One of the very popular statements that I go by with a lot is that statement that says that if you want to go, go fast, you can go alone, but if you want to go far, you go with others. And then if you marry that with the statement that says, that one that talks about standing on this shoulder of giants so that you can see far, I think is one of the reasons why we decided that, why we're not speaking with 70-year-olds. I think the experience that you have, the struggles you've gone through, the challenges, and what you've been able to make of yourselves, your faith, your family, your business is something worth emulating, and has given us the opportunity to listen to today. I'm thoroughly impressed and it's encouraged. I think I know all the three of you very well, but I think listening to you from this context is also further strengthening my own resolve. And I'm really, really grateful that you made out, time to be with us this evening. So thank you very, very much. We hope that in the future, we'll still be able to reach out to you for future sessions like this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deji.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, JJ. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Yeah.
So I guess the rest of us can stay while the panelists while they drop off. All right, so I won't keep this long. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining. I think you'll agree with me that there's a lot to go and chew on, and I'm sure many of you would want this video so that you can also listen to it again and draw some more life lessons from them. So I will send the link to the video to all the group leaders, and they will share in the different groups. And those who are not members or part of any of the groups, reach out to me one way or the other so that I can share the link with you. I'm going to put my number up. So I just put my number there now. So send me a WhatsApp message. I will try to send the link to you as well so that you can all have the link to the video and listen to them again. So thank you very much once again, everyone, for joining. And have a great week.